Now that you have looked at this video about cultural competence, you will remember that culture is was defined in the video, but it can be defined in different ways, such as the customary beliefs, also in terms of social norms or material traits of the racial, religious, or a social group. But culture is an element of ethnicity that includes shared ideas, values, and assumptions about life that characterize a particular group of people. It also includes technology, art, symbols, beliefs, and science, as well as moral systems and characterized by behaviors and habits. So we can see that it is a complex issue when we are talking about culture. When we're talking about the cultural values, that is really the the guidance that is basically or the principles or the standards that members of a cultural group share in common. And this also then provides the guidance to solving life's problems in response to the needs of a cultural group's members and environment. So these are also then the organizational arrangements, and these can differentiate differentiate people from other people, or a group of people from a different group of people, and it provides the structure for what members of a specific cultural group determine as proper or improper behavior. So culture provides strength and stability, but this is also not static. And these can have different principles or standards with regards to child rearing practices, dietary habits, and we will see that different people have different dietary habits, even religious practices, family structure, values, also attitudes. We will learn about these as we go along. And where do they get their cultural values from? It is usually from parents, teachers, religious and political leaders, and also sometimes their respective peers. So when we're talking about diversity, this is really when we are talking about the differences among groups of people. This could very much be a diversity amongst in health between certain people, groups of people, and we have seen, even when we were looking at food insecurity earlier on, that there is diversity even in America if we look at what the health conditions are amongst the different groups of people. When we're talking about cross-cultural, that is when we are talking about the interaction between or among individuals that represent distinctly different cultures. So I've already mentioned to you earlier that in my lab, we have a lot of different cultures, that we do not have a single United States person in my lab, my community nutrition lab. I have a student from South Korea, I've got one from Taiwan, I've got one from Ghana, I've got one from Zimbabwe, I have one from Nigeria, Bangladesh, India. So all these different cultures have to come together, and we have to interact with each other, and this is where we learn from each other to see what is acceptable behavior, so that we all can get a common ground and work in this cross-cultural environment. When we're talking about ethnocentric, that is something that we do not want people to have in the anywhere, or really in the health care business, because this is when a person is ethnocentric when they consider that their beliefs and values or customs and viewpoints are superior to those of other groups. So our way of doing things is not the only way of doing things, and we really have to be careful when we are going to talk to other people, that we do not come across as judgmental when we talk to people that have different cultures than ours. So why is it that we need cultural competence? If we look at what is happening with the population trends in America, in 2014, we saw that they were basically the country was majority white people, with followed by Hispanic or Latino and African American population group, and then smaller groups that are from other races. But if we look at what the estimation is that's going to happen in 2050, is that by 2050, the Hispanic population will form about 50% of the overall American. No, sorry about that. The white population will only form about 50% of the population in the US, and by 2060 will no longer be a majority population group, but will then also be much lower than 50%. So there is definitely a change in the cultural makeup. We look at the country, and with that also there is increased linguistic diversity, and more than 300 languages are spoken in America at the moment, and it looks as if there is 20% of all the people that for whom English is not their first language. So we cannot always just accept that when we are talking to other people that they understand English and that they even understand what people are talking about. And I think I've also already mentioned to you that even in my country where I speak English, different terminologies exist. Like I've said to you, what we call your biscuit, we call a scone, and your cookies, we call a biscuit. So we have to be aware of these differences so that we can make sure that we understand when we talk to people. Also, when we have a look at the increase in the older population, there will definitely be more older people as in the future, and we will probably have to deal with a population group that will have difficulty hearing and seeing, and we'll have to make sure that we will be able to get all the information that we want to tell them across to them in a language that will be easy for them to understand. Also, when we're talking about the diversification of the healthcare workforce, at the moment there is still disparity when we're talking about the healthcare workforce, and there is really a need for to diversify the healthcare workforce. So we are going to have to in future work with more people from different cultures as this disparity is going to be addressed, and we will have to know how to treat our colleagues also when they are from different cultures, so that we can work together. Also, there is an increased use of traditional therapies as there are more cultural people coming into the country. Combinations of conventional, alternative, and complementary approaches. I think we have to be aware of that traditional healers sometimes have different treatment, and we need to be aware of those so that we are not judgmental when people come to us and say that they've been to a traditional healer, but that we understand where they are coming from. So also when we are looking at the causes of why we need cultural competence, that is really for us to because of the socio-economic status. We have already seen when we looked at the health status, and we also looked at food insecurity, that the minority groups at the moment are really also not as healthy as the white population group. So there is also lack of insurance that some of the minority groups have. Also, the cultural beliefs may contribute to some of the health risks. There are people with different cultural beliefs. Some of them do not place health as a priority. Also, the access to and utilization of healthcare services. We've looked that there were also quite a lot of disparities there when we talked about the healthcare. And then sometimes there could still be discrimination or racism or even stereotyping, and we have to be aware of that so that we do not fall into that trap to stereotype people by saying perhaps that all Hispanic people do a certain thing or all white people have certain habits, because there are also even differences within those cultures, and there are also environmental differences between certain cultures and races. As we have noticed that when we are talking about pollution, that the lower income people are sometimes also living in the more polluted areas and may have more exposure to certain toxins. Also, they may also have more hazardous work environment, and may be exposed to more health risks as well. So in the next video is 7 minutes that you can have a look at what are the social determinants of health also in the US. And this will be the end of part 2, and then part 3 will follow after you've watched this video.